You were asleep when the signal came. Not asleep in the ordinary sense, your body rested in cryogenic drift, nestled inside a titanium shell designed for the impossible silence between stars. Earth, a fragile blue marble you once called home, had faded into a memory your brain kept tucked beneath dream layers. You hadn't aged. You hadn't moved. Time, for you, had become theoretical. Until now. A soft chime echoed through your hibernation chamber. Not urgent. Not loud. Just, deliberate. Like a knock on a door that no longer had a house attached to it. The chamber lights glowed pale blue. Vital signs blinked in a slow, steady rhythm on the display above your stasis capsule. Pressure normalized. Temperature adjusted. Then came the voice. Subject A-99. Identity, Elias Quinn. Human. Terran-born. Age, 37 Earth Standard. Status, eligible. The voice wasn't mechanical. It wasn't synthetic. It had warmth. A measured, almost ancient tone that made your pulse skip. Please remain still. You have been selected. Your eyes fluttered open. Muscles rebelled. Memory returned in fragments, earthquakes in Los Angeles, summer storms in Nairobi, a child's laugh in your old apartment on 3rd and Hoyt. You remembered stepping into the cryopod, the slow hiss of induced hibernation, and the promise, we will wake you only if humanity needs you. You never expected to be needed. The chamber rotated gently as your body adjusted to light gravity. Through a transparent panel, you could see the stars, millions of them, unmoving, cold, and beautiful. A dust trail cut across the black canvas, the Perseid arc, you thought. The math in your brain worked faster than your heart. You weren't near Earth. Not even close. The ship's AI spoke again, now in a lower register. Elias Quinn. You are hereby designated as Earth's representative delegate in accordance with Clause 7 of the Galactic Accord of Sentient Worlds. You sat up. Pain bloomed through your spine like a sleeping limb reawakening. You tried to speak but your throat was dry. The AI continued, you have been chosen to speak on behalf of your species at the Interstellar Tribunal. Time to arrival, 42 standard hours. Preparing briefing sequence. Tribunal. Chosen. You trained for a variety of possibilities, diplomacy, xenolinguistics, ethics, but those were simulations. Theoretical. You were a researcher, not a politician. Not a soldier. Not, whatever this was. Your cryopod retracted into the floor with a quiet hum. The walls around you lit up with symbols, millions of years of knowledge compressed into flowing, circular glyphs. One by one, they translated. The chosen must stand for the whole. Judgment is balanced. The trial is memory. The trial is truth. The trial is forever. You whispered, voice still hoarse, what does that mean? The AI didn't answer. The ship, named Solara 4, according to its outer hull, was small. Purpose-built. No crew. No weapons. Just you, a chair, and an interface older than any Terran technology you'd ever seen. As you floated down a narrow corridor, light pulsing like a heartbeat under your feet, you passed a viewport that gave you your first glimpse of what lay ahead. The Arc Spire. It was not a station. Not a planet. Not a ship. It was a colossal structure shaped like a spiraled horn of glass and metal, orbiting a star that pulsed red and blue at its center. It shimmered, not with light, but with intention, like it knew it was being watched. That, the AI whispered, is where you will be judged. You leaned closer to the glass. Around the Arc Spire, you saw dozens, no, hundreds, of vessels. Organic ships. Crystalline arcs. Beings of light floating freely. Each one representing a world. A civilization. A hope. And yours? A lone cryo-survivor from a struggling blue world with too much war and not enough wisdom. What happens if I fail, you asked. The AI paused. For a moment, the ship itself seemed to go still. There will be no second delegate. Earth will lose its seat in the galactic concordance. Species deemed unfit for representation are excluded. You exhaled slowly. Your breath fogged the glass. No pressure. The AI guided you into a meditative chamber, circular, soft-lit, filled with gentle tones that resonated through the walls like breathing. This, you were told, was to help you align your mental state for the trial. Tell me, you asked, why was I chosen? The AI responded, you passed the selection filters. Emotional complexity. Moral elasticity. Memory retention. Capacity for shame, hope, humor, and paradox. In other words, you muttered, I'm human. Yes, said the AI, but also, rare. You sat in silence for a while, letting the chamber do its work. Your thoughts drifted back to Earth. To your sister. Your old dog. The first snowfall you remembered as a child. The smell of the ocean near Monterey. The dull ache of every goodbye you never got to say before freezing yourself for a mission you assumed would never activate. A voice not your own spoke inside your mind. You are more than your name, Elias Quinn. You are your planet's echo. The last sound Earth will make if no one listens. You looked up. The chamber lights dimmed. Outside, the arc spire grew closer. And somewhere within it, the fate of your entire species waited. The arc spire loomed ahead, spinning slowly in its orbit like a cathedral forged from starlight and intention. You watched it grow larger through the viewing pane, its spiral towers stretching into the vacuum as if daring the cosmos to question its authority. The silence in the ship felt heavier now, not empty, but expectant. Like the universe was holding its breath. Approach vector locked, the AI intoned gently. Prepare for interface. You sat at the central console, palms resting lightly on the touch-reactive glass. Symbols appeared beneath your fingers, soft geometric glyphs that pulsed with faint energy. The ship began to slow, rotating gently to match the spire's spin. No thrusters. No rumble. Just the sensation of motion aligning. Your heart rate increased. I'm not ready, you whispered. The AI responded with something you didn't expect. No one ever is. The docking process was unlike anything Earth had ever conceived. Your ship dissolved into light as it neared the spire. Its atoms deconstructing, reorganizing, translating into energy. You felt yourself disintegrate, and yet you were still, you. Thought had become substance. Perception became location. You stood in a chamber with no walls. Endless stars surrounded you, orbiting slowly in a lattice of amber threads. A floor materialized beneath your feet, circular, transparent, shifting like water held together by gravity. Other platforms hovered nearby, each with a figure standing in silent contemplation. Some looked vaguely humanoid. Others shimmered with forms that defied anatomy. A voice filled your mind, not from outside, but within. Welcome, Delegate Quinn. You have crossed the threshold. The sensation was not auditory, but emotional. The voice felt regal. Patient. Like a librarian who had waited eons for you to open a particular book. What is this place, you asked, your voice echoing inside your thoughts. This is the vestibule of the tribunal. The place between what was and what will be. You turned slowly. Across the expanse, a figure stepped forward on a mirrored path that shimmered into existence with every step. It resembled a woman, cloaked in a robe that shimmered like ice suspended in a nebula. Her face was soft and luminous, her eyes like twin galaxies caught in orbit. I am Lyrian, witness of memory. I will guide you through the rites. You bowed your head instinctively, though you weren't sure if that was appropriate. I'm not a leader, you said. I was never trained for this. She smiled, not with her face, but with her presence. And yet you were chosen. Not by us, but by your world. You followed her as paths formed beneath your feet, connecting platforms in fluid arcs of light. She spoke without sound, transmitting understanding directly into your thoughts. Each species may send one soul to stand before the tribunal when their civilization has reached the apex point. What's the apex point? The moment when a species can choose either to continue, or to collapse. The cusp of planetary adolescence. You call it progress. We call it the test of meaning. You thought of Earth, of its wars, its ambition, its art, its failure to reconcile beauty with brutality. What happens if we fail? Lyrian stopped walking. The stars above dimmed slightly. Nothing. Nothing. No conquest. No punishment. Simply absence. The gates close. The dialogue ends. The universe proceeds without your voice. That struck deeper than any threat. You reached a chamber made entirely of memory. That's the only way to describe it. It wasn't physical. You felt the room more than saw it. Scenes flickered in the air like living dreams, millions of them. Babies being born. Forests burning. Cities celebrating. People dying with songs in their mouths. Languages both ancient and unborn. 1,000 Earths from 1,000 perspectives. Joy. Pain. Wonder. This is your world's echo, Lyrian said. You were speechless. Why me, you asked again. Why just one of us? Because one mind is a universe. Because one soul contains contradiction. Because truth is not consensus, it is courage. You were guided to the edge of a circular threshold. Beyond it, a vertical chasm opened into space itself, lit from below by a spiraling singularity, like a tornado of light and memory. This is the well, Lyrian explained. To stand before the tribunal, you must descend. It will not hurt. It will only show you what you are. You looked down. The light called to you, not with urgency, but inevitability. You felt your knees weaken, but you stepped forward. As your body tilted forward, the ground vanished. Your breath caught in your throat, and you fell, slowly, weightlessly, into the well. And then, the memories began. Not just yours. You were a child again, but also a parent. You were a soldier, trembling in a trench. You were a violinist in Vienna. A girl screaming in smoke. A poet watching the moon rise over Cairo. A boy in a refugee camp teaching his sister to laugh. You were all of them. The well showed you what it meant to be human, not as a fact, but as a feeling. You wept. Not because it was sad, but because it was true. You landed softly on a platform suspended in blackness. No walls. No sound. Then, one by one, the voices came. Not shouting. Not accusing. Just, asking. Why should your kind be remembered? What makes your species worthy of belonging? What do you love that is not about you? You stood alone. You had no prepared speech. Just the weight of a world behind your eyes. And ahead, on the horizon, you saw them. The tribunal. Waiting. You stood motionless before the tribunal. Or rather, within it. The space defied geometry. The room seemed circular yet infinite, layered in tiers that rose and fell like waves. Light pulsed from unseen sources, casting a soft, shifting glow that painted the platform beneath your feet with slow-moving glyphs. Figures emerged from the surrounding mist, 12 in total. Not gods. Not monsters. Witnesses. Each one representing an ancient civilization that had passed the trial before you. Their forms were wildly different, one floated as a cloud of refracting light. Another resembled a spiral of living stone. One was a shifting lattice of vines and nerves. And still, you felt no fear. Only presence. The kind that silences thoughts without asking. "We are the 12, a chorus said, though no mouths moved. "We are memory. We are testimony. We are the trial." You inhaled deeply, trying to keep your breathing steady. The central figure, tall, metallic, humanoid, stepped forward. Eyes like glowing fractals locked onto yours. "You stand as the echo of Earth," it said. "Speak your name." "Elias Quinn," you said. "Of Earth." "Human." "We will ask. You will answer. There is no punishment. There is only understanding." You nodded, unsure if that was what they expected. "Why do you make war?" one asked, its voice like wine through broken glass. You paused. Then answered slowly. "We fear what we don't understand. We fight because we want to feel safe. But we also fight for justice, for freedom, and sometimes, for reasons we later regret." The being nodded, as though regret was a rare and precious answer. "Why do you poison your own world?" asked another, its form blooming like coral underwater. You swallowed hard. "Because we've been short-sighted. We value convenience. Profit. Power. But we're learning. Slowly. Some of us fight to protect what remains." Silence. Agreement. A pulse of light flickered in approval. "Do you believe you are alone in the universe?" "No," you said, instantly. "I never did. Yet your people behave as though they are." You didn't argue. That was the point of being here. A different entity approached, a field of softly spinning cubes orbiting a glowing core. "What beauty have you made that was not born of utility?" Images rushed to your mind, cathedrals, poems, paintings, music. You thought of Maya, your niece, drawing stars on the wall of your apartment with crayon. Of strangers dancing in the rain. Of laughter in pain. "We make art," you said. Even when no one sees it. They studied you. Not just your words, but your memories, your patterns, your fractures, your contradictions. You felt them walking through your past like gentle archaeologists. They saw your shame. They saw your hope. They saw everything. And they did not recoil. Lyrian, the witness of memory, appeared once again, though her form flickered. She stood beside you now, no longer a guide, but something closer to kin. "He is ready," she said softly. The platform beneath you brightened. The glyphs changed, no longer language, but resonance. A sound hummed in your chest. A harmony you hadn't known you were missing. Then, without warning, the light collapsed inward. And you were no longer in the tribunal. You stood in a vast field under a golden sky. Wind moved through tall grass like a whisper. Across from you stood another version of yourself. But older. Weathered. With eyes full of stars. "I'm you," the figure said. "What you become, if you pass." You didn't speak. "You carry the voice of your people," it said. "But that voice is only real if it echoes in truth." The figure turned, pointing toward a distant city. The buildings shimmered with light, constantly reshaping, like possibility. "Earth has brilliance," your future self said. "But brilliance is not worth without compassion." You nodded. "Speak for them. But speak as if they could hear you now." Suddenly, the tribunal returned. The 12 beings awaited your answer. "Elias Quinn," they said as one. "Final query. What does it mean to be human?" You took a breath. Closed your eyes. Then opened them, and answered. "It means to fail. Often. Deeply. Loudly. But also to stand back up. To build something again from ash and memory. It means to see the void and still paint light. To love, knowing loss. To reach, knowing nothing may reach back. It means, hope. Silence. And then, for the first time, a sound, applause, but not of hands. Of galaxies unfolding. Of suns humming. Of wind through thought. You were still standing. But Earth had spoken. There was no transition. One breath, you stood in the chamber of the tribunal. The next, you were elsewhere, yet not physically. More like, inside something vast and thinking. The kind of place that remembers you even if you've never been there before. You floated, weightless, in a sphere of infinite reflections. Each surface shimmered with motion, scenes, experiences, lives. This was the trial. You weren't here to defend humanity. You were here to become it. A voice surrounded you, not Lyrians, not the 12s. This one was older. Ancient. It reverberated not in your ears but in your ancestry. The trial of species begins. The first reflection flickered into place. You saw a woman, barefoot, standing in a savanna under a blood-orange sky. Her skin glowed in the fading light. She held the hand of a child. Around her, silence. Behind her, smoke. She was the last of her village. You felt her breath. Her fear. Her decision to walk forward, not back. The sphere whispered, tenacity. The scene shifted. Now a young man with soot-stained cheeks crouched beneath rubble, fingers trembling as he lifted debris off a stranger's broken leg. Sirens screamed. Dust choked the air. He looked up, face streaked with blood and disbelief, and kept digging. Compassion. Another reflection, a scientist alone in a frozen observatory, her breath fogging her helmet as she released a probe into Saturn's upper atmosphere. She'd trained her whole life for this, knowing no one would remember her name. Curiosity. The trial continued. The reflections were not always noble. A tyrant speaking to a stadium full of zealots. A general authorizing drone strikes from 1,000 miles away. A child lighting fire to a forest just to watch something disappear. Capacity for destruction. You felt shame. It clung to you like smoke. But the reflections didn't stop there. They showed those who rose afterward, those who rebuilt. A young girl teaching literacy in the remains of a bombed-out city. A man planting trees where oil fields used to burn. A group of elders voting for peace in a tribal council after decades of war. Capacity for renewal. The trial wasn't testing if your species was perfect. It was asking if you could learn. Suddenly, the reflections froze. A single word burned across the sphere, history. And then, all at once, you were pulled into it. Not as an observer, but as a participant. You stood inside a trench during Earth's Second World War. Rain poured from a gray sky. The stench of fear and death thickened the air. Soldiers screamed. One looked at you, eyes wide, younger than you ever remembered being, and asked, "Is it worth it?" You couldn't answer. The scene shifted. You were in a courtroom during the Nuremberg trials. In the crowd, survivors. On the stand, monsters in suits. You felt the weight of justice and how impossibly fragile it was. Then. A civil rights march in Alabama. A protest in Tiananmen Square. A masked doctor during a viral outbreak, holding a patient's hand in a dimly lit ICU. So many fights for better. So many failures. So many attempts. The reflections turned inward. You weren't just watching anymore. You were reliving every part of humanity you carried inside. And then the trial changed. You were placed on a platform, no longer alone. Across from you stood representatives of other species. Sentients from other worlds who had passed their own trials. One was translucent, fluid in motion. Another vibrated with layers of sound and color. One resembled a humanoid tree covered in glowing pollen. They circled you, curious, cautious. You spoke first. Why am I here alone? A being that looked like a lattice of singing crystal responded. Because unity must be earned. Not inherited. Another, its voice resonating like thunder underwater, added. When we were tested, we were divided, too. You realized they weren't judging you as an outsider. They were remembering their own trials. You were led to a hall, a cathedral of memory. Inside, you saw monuments to species that had failed the trial. They weren't punished. They weren't erased. They were forgotten. No contact. No alliance. No trade. No knowledge. Their names were sealed behind silence. You looked at the empty walls with dread. And made a promise, we will not be one of them. Suddenly, the lights dimmed. The other representatives stepped back. And Lyrian appeared once more. Her expression was solemn now. Heavier. You've walked the trial, she said. You've faced the mirror. You nodded. Quietly. Do you still wish to speak on your world's behalf? You didn't answer with words. You stepped forward. And stood alone in the center of the chamber. All around you, the tribunal returned. The 12 shimmered into form. Above them, galaxies slowed. Time itself seemed to still. The voice, older than creation, returned. One soul. One species. One question. Are you ready to carry your kind forward? You said. Yes. The light narrowed into a single beam. Your memories poured into it like breath. All of Earth, the wars, the kindness, the failures, the dreams, streamed from your mind into the cosmos. The light accepted everything. No censorship. No filters. Just truth. And then, silence. For what felt like hours. Then, something changed. You felt it before you saw it. A warmth. Not fire. But acceptance. The kind of warmth you feel in someone's eyes when they believe in you, despite the reasons not to. Humanity, the voice said, is still becoming. The trial ended. And the universe made room for you. The chamber dissolved around you like mist at dawn. What replaced it was not a place, but presence. You felt no ground. No gravity. No walls. Only weight, not physical, but metaphysical. The kind that settles in your chest when you know something greater than yourself is happening and there's no pause button left to hit. The universe had asked its questions. Now it would listen. You hovered in a liminal plane where thought shaped reality. Faint wisps of memory, your own and humanity's, circled like distant stars. You saw a mother holding a child under a monsoon sky. An artist painting on a war-torn wall. A satellite drifting lifeless over a blue planet that still sang lullabies in every language ever spoken. You stood at the crossroads of being remembered and being erased. A voice, not the tribunal, not Lyrian, but something older than them both, spoke inside your soul. Tell us the story of your kind. You inhaled. Not air, but clarity. And you began. We were born from dust, but we didn't stay there. We crawled out of oceans that didn't want us and built languages to talk to stars we'd never reach. We feared the dark, so we invented light. We feared death, so we created art. We feared each other, so we tried to understand. Your words rippled outward, becoming constellations of sound and memory. You saw your childhood. The face of your mother. The laughter of your niece. The heartbreak of your first failure. The cold steel of the cryopod you once entered thinking you'd never wake. We broke each other. Often. But we also learned to hold hands across continents. We burned forests, and then we planted new ones. We polluted skies, then taught children to clean them. We built machines to kill, and others to heal. We became gods in small ways, but not wise ones. You paused. Something shifted. The plane around you responded, not with color, but with emotion. A warmth, spreading outward like sunlight on skin. You were being heard. You continued. Our planet was fragile. We knew it. But we pretended it wasn't. We stared into screens more than each other's eyes. We forgot how to listen to silence. But you stepped forward. There was no floor, yet each step felt purposeful. We also remembered. The tribunal reappeared, not as judges now, but as echoes. They were witnesses of your final act. The being of fractal light, its face unreadable, leaned in. Show us your memory. Your chest burned, not with pain, but release. The memories came pouring out. Not just your life, but Earth's. You showed them laughter. A child laughing uncontrollably in a schoolyard. The kind of laugh that makes you forget why you were ever afraid. You showed them sacrifice. A firefighter in Mumbai carrying strangers through smoke-blind corridors. A medic in Aleppo patching up civilians with no supplies left but their hands and resolve. You showed them joy. The swell of an orchestra playing Tchaikovsky under starlight. The explosion of cheers when a nation wins peace without war. You showed them intimacy. A couple holding hands while watching the moon rise. A son whispering thanks to a dying parent. You showed them failure, and what came after. Floods. Fires. Famines. And the hands that rebuilt. The voices that refused to be silenced. The marchers. The healers. The teachers. The scene around you shifted again. You were now inside the memories you'd projected. On the surface of Earth. But, it wasn't how you left it. It was older. Quieter. The continents had changed. Cities had turned to overgrown ruins. But still, the planet breathed. You walked through what remained, lush valleys reclaiming highways, forests swallowing old factories, animals thriving where humans had once built walls. And then, people. A new generation. Dark-skinned, pale-skinned, no skin at all. Hybrids. Adapted. Evolved. Still human. Still hopeful. They sat in circles, not rows. They taught each other using holograms and firelight. They held no flags. Wore no uniforms. But they sang. You listened. The song had no lyrics, but it sounded like forgiveness. A soft chime echoed across the dreamscape. Lyrian returned, standing in the middle of a starlit grove that hadn't existed seconds ago. You approached her. She smiled. They have decided. You braced yourself. She stepped forward. Touched your shoulder. Earth will be remembered. You exhaled. Shoulders slumped. Tears stung your eyes. You asked, what does that mean, exactly? She tilted her head. Her voice softened. It means your species has joined the choir of civilizations. You will be invited to share, to learn, to shape. Your voice will not be lost. Around you, doorways formed, floating gates leading to other worlds, other peoples. Some shimmered like waterfalls of light. Others pulsed like living organisms. One opened to a swirling spiral of books and thought clouds. Lyrian gestured to them. You are no longer alone, Elias Quinn. You watched as data surged through invisible channels. Cultural exchange. Trade. Ideas. Poetry. Medicine. Concepts that had never crossed Earth's skies now flowed toward it like gifts. You whispered, will they know? Lyrian nodded. They already feel it. The stars have moved closer. Then came the hardest part. It was time to return. You would wake in your cryopod, older now, changed. But no one would remember what you'd seen. No one would know you did this. That was the price of the trial, anonymity. The honor was not glory. It was continuation. You traded your identity for Earth's future. And you did it willingly. You stepped back into the corridor of memory. The tribunal began to fade. The song continued. As you returned to your cryopod aboard Solara 4, the ship began transmitting. Not a message. A beacon. An invitation. Back on Earth, somewhere in a quiet valley, a scientist would intercept the signal. A child would ask what it meant. A poet would feel it in a dream. And something would awaken in them. Wonder. The desire to reach again. Lyrian's voice echoed one last time. You were not perfect. But you were true. And that is enough.